QB News. Woo-hoo! All praise to the Most High. Much love to everybody who's been showing me support from day 1, from day 2, from day 3. If you've been fucking with me, I fuck with you. And of course, much love to everybody who has donated to the PayPal or the Cash App. I just picked that up as well, just because people have been requesting that, hey man, do you have Cash App? So guys, when you send in these Cash App donations, make sure you send me like your name or your email address, because I like to send thank yous, and I also want to send you the link to a video if you guys are requesting a donation for a video. So I need that information. So when you're sending a Cash App donation, make sure you put a note in, at least give me, you know, your Instagram handle or your email address so I can send you links to these new hot videos, because anybody who donates, of course, gets to see these videos first. So I just want to say thank you again. I've gotten a few generous donations from people who just want to see this thing keep moving, and I appreciate that. So guys, whenever you get a chance, make sure you drop something in the bucket for your boy IG Jesus, and trust me, I'm gonna keep on pressing out this good info, because this shit sits great with my soul, as it does with most people. And that's what I'm finding out now. It's a beautiful thing to see my indigenous copper-colored Israelites leading this new wave of truth. What a time to be alive. You know, there are so many people that I'm just trying to thank, that I have on the top of my mind. First of all, I want to thank my boy Martin Luther III, Vin Lloyd. If you guys aren't following him on Instagram, make sure you follow my man. He's dope. Zion Marley. I want to say shout out to Dane Calloway. I want to say shout out to 432 Drop. I want to say shout out to Johnny Aborigine, Lex Real. I also want to say shout out to Shy Diddy, and a big shout out to my homie Strength of Israel. This kid is like 15, 16 years old. He's picking up big knowledge. He's asking me complicated questions. He's asking me about, hey bro, hey, what proof do you have that the Sea of Galilee is fake? I'm having to dig up old shit for this little nigga. I appreciate that though. Much love to that, man. I love passing wisdom along to the younger generation, because a lot of this stuff, you know, they're actually interested in. You will be surprised at the amount of young people who are interested in the information that they're not being fed in school, just because they know that they're being fed lies. And if you can show them how they're being lied to, oh my gosh, you'll see a spark. You'll see it. And so right now we're starting to see the truth resonate with our people, and it's setting us free. We know we're special, and now we're starting to see it. We know, because many of us have always been tatted with the laws of the Most High in our soul. We were blessed with ethical, moral, a compass. We were blessed with morality. There was never any reason for our people to deceive the world. The truth as we know it is motherfucking beautiful. Now, for other people, they may need to deceive because the truth isn't as beautiful to them as it is to us. You follow me? So they needed to go way out of their way to make sure that they hid the truth from us, because the truth about us challenges their existence. So the further we got away from the truth, the uglier it got, the more lost we became. Now, as we get closer to the truth, it's more beautiful than the sunrise over the flat Atlantic horizon. That's the Most High's promise of a new day, and that is the day that we make a difference, because we now have control of the day. What a time to be alive. Watch the nation form like Voltron. At the moment, we are creating magic, reversing history. We are making text and generations of false knowledge crumble within seconds. We're not just debunking the globe. We're not just debunking geography. We're not just debunking science. We're not just debunking history. We're not just debunking the supposed smartest people who ever lived. And wasn't that hard, actually. We are changing the dichotomy of freedom and slavery. We're giving ourselves options. We don't have to accept the narrative of our oppressor. We don't have to read words that were meant to bind your mind and accept them as truth anymore. So speaking of the liars who scribe the bullshit with the pen, let's venture into the center of the Khazarian cave swindle for supposedly the holiest city in the world, Jerusalem. Any scholar or historian will tell you that Jerusalem is one of the most attacked and besieged cities in the history of the world. Now, the past of the city dates back to 4500 BCE. Now, I just want to take a moment to explain what BCE means as it pertains to chronology, because it's important to understand the deception of European historical chronology. You need to understand these timelines. So I remember in school, when referring to chronological eras, we used to use the terms BC and AD. And as I did my research, I found that in some circles, BC, even before it was academically changed, BC still meant before Common Era. But I was always taught that BC meant before Christ and that AD meant after death. And then later I found out that AD stood for Anno Domini, which is a Latin term meaning in the year of our Lord. Obviously, this acronym has Christian overtones. In 1998, Cunningham and Starr wrote, BC and CE do not presuppose faith in Christ and hence are more appropriate for interfaith dialogue rather than BC or AD because they obviously suppose some sort of Christian faith. This very point cannot be overlooked. The current system of dating days, months, and years is completely based off the life and time of Jesus Christ. But here's the kicker. No one, and I mean no one, knows exactly when he was born or when he died. Historians, archaeologists, and scholars argue about the exact time Jesus was born and died all the time. Even furthermore, there's no proof that Jesus ever existed. Now, it's more than coincidence that Jerusalem is the headquarters for three of the world's major religions: Islam, Christianity, and Khazarianism, aka matzah, baby foreskin eaterism. I don't know. Niggas eat baby dick skin, nigga. Them niggas is nasty. Fuck out my face, man. I don't know, YouTube will probably fucking ban this video because I said Khazarianism. Hey, I didn't say that other word that obviously gets me banned. But this, so, obviously there's no coincidence that Jerusalem is the headquarters for Islam, Christianity, and matzo ball baby eater, Khazarianism. But this coincidence is gonna make it very easy for us to uncover the huge lie behind this holy piece of shit. First of all, I think it's very important to understand the overall chronological history of the city of Jerusalem. Before we go any further, I want to say this. According to the scribes, the men with the pen who write the lies, Jerusalem was settled around 4500 BCE. Now, for our chronological understanding, we're going to start this conversation of Israel, the Israel that matters, around the time of King David, which, according to the scribes, remember, I say according to the scribes, is around 1000 BCE. So, very quickly, I'm going to read a short snippet from Wikipedia, and I'm going to be using Wikipedia for the majority of this discussion and this lecture. And that's mainly because Wikipedia is all you're going to need. See, this is general history, and the deception can be easily identified. So I'm going to read a short snippet about King David so we can start to understand the deception and the history behind Jerusalem and Israel. I know a lot of people are already familiar with the story of King David, but for the sake of history, we're going to go through it really fast. In the biblical narrative, David is a young shepherd who first gains prominence as a musician and later by killing Goliath. A lot of people have heard the story of David and Goliath. He becomes a favorite of King Saul and a close friend of Saul's son Jonathan. Worried that David's going to take his throne, Saul turns on David. After Saul and Jonathan are killed in battle, David is anointed king. David conquers Jerusalem, taking the Ark of the Covenant into the city and establishing the kingdom founded by Saul. As king, David arranges the death of Uriah the Hittite. Now, Uriah is actually my namesake, so I've always found this story interesting. He basically covered his adultery, and he had to cover his adultery because he impregnated Uriah's wife Bathsheba after he lusted. After watching Bathsheba bathe, all of a sudden he's like, I gotta tap that. He tapped it, impregnated her. Next thing you know, he's calling Uriah from battle like, hey bro, you need to come tend to your wife. Uriah's like, why would I come from battle to tend to my wife? He's like, bro, you just need to come do this, man. I don't know why. I don't have any reason. So Uriah came back from battle, but because he was forced to come back to battle, but he did not sleep with his wife. So as a result, David had him killed. So according to the same text, God denies David the opportunity to build the temple, and his son Absalom tries to overthrow him. At that point, David flees Jerusalem during Absalom's rebellion, Absalom's death. After his death, he returns to the city to rule just before he dies. Before he dies, he names his son as his successor. He is often mentioned in prophetic literature as an ideal king and an ancestor of a future Messiah. I want to stick on this term Messiah for a second. A lot of people confuse the term Messiah. For the purposes of this conversation, Messiah literally means a king of Israel who sits on the throne, who is a descendant of King David. Just so we understand, it's not any sort of godly figure from out the sky. It's not half God, half man. It is literally a descendant of King David who will sit on the throne of Israel. Continuing, historians of the ancient Near East agree that David probably existed around 1000 BCE. Notice I say historians or academia, the guys with the pens. But there is little that can be said about him as a historical figure. Really? Really? After all that. Now I'm going to jump down a little bit because this doesn't really mean anything. Somebody says that they found something that says the House of David. Ancient Near East historians generally doubt that the united monarchy described in the Bible ever existed. So I'm going to skip down because there's some bullshit right there. David is richly represented in post-biblical Jewish written and oral tradition and is discussed in the New Testament. Early Christians interpreted the life of Jesus in light of the references to the Messiah and to David. Jesus is described as being descended from David. Although Jesus lived so many years after, not much is recorded during the time of Jesus, but they know Jesus is descended from David. David is discussed in the Quran and figures in Islamic and oral written tradition as well. So getting back to the history of Jerusalem, at this point, between 1000 BCE and 931, King David has now died and Solomon takes over. This is about a 70-year span. Now, during the 70-year span, this is when Israel is becoming established as an actual nation. So at this point, Solomon, of course, builds the first temple. Now, Solomon's known throughout history quite fondly, in most cases, as a wealthy and wise king. Now, of course, Solomon also sinned. So real quickly, we'll go back over to Wikipedia just to refresh people on who King Solomon was as it pertains to the nation of Israel and his role in establishing the capital city of Jerusalem. King Solomon, of course, the fabulously wealthy king of Israel who succeeded his father, King David. The conventional dates of Solomon's reign are circa 970 to 931. I'm gonna jump ahead here. He is described as the third king of the United Monarchy, which would later break apart into the Kingdom of Israel and the Southern Kingdom of Judah shortly after his death. Following the split, his patrilineal descendants ruled over Judah alone. According to the Talmud, Solomon is one of the 48 prophets, according to the Talmud. I'm not even going to get into that right now, okay? In the Quran, he is generally considered a major prophet, and Muslims generally refer to him by the Arabic variant Suleiman, son of David. The Hebrew Bible credits him as the builder of the first temple in Jerusalem, beginning in the 4th year of his reign. Using the vast wealth he had accumulated, he dedicated the temple to Yahweh, the God of Israel. He is portrayed as having great wisdom, wealth, and power beyond either of the previous kings of the country. But also as king, he sinned. His sins included idolatry, marrying foreign women, and ultimately turning away from Yahweh. This led to the kingdoms being torn during the reign of his son Rehoboam. Solomon is the subject of many other later references and legends, most notably in the 1st century apocryphal work known as the Testament of Solomon. In the New Testament, he is portrayed as a teacher of wisdom excelled only by Jesus, I guess, and as arrayed in glory but excelled by the lilies of the field. Excelled by the lilies of the field. Oh yeah. In later years, in mostly non-biblical circles, Solomon became known as a magician and an exorcist with numerous amulets and medallion seals dating from the Hellenistic period, invoking his name. So yeah, if you look at a few different seals, you'll notice there's the seal of Solomon, and you'll notice the seal of Solomon in a lot of places. Okay, so getting back to the history of Jerusalem. We'll move a little bit faster going through these eras. So skipping ahead, after the split of the empire where it's now the Southern Kingdom and the Northern Kingdom, we're going to jump ahead to 589 BCE. Now this is when Nebuchadnezzar is shocking all Jerusalem. Jerusalem is destroyed by the Babylonians. Of course, the first temple that Solomon built is also destroyed. Now the Babylonians rule for a span of a few decades. At the end of Babylonian captivity is King Cyrus the Great of Persia, who permits the Jews to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. Now, during the time of this second temple building, they call it Herod the Great's temple. This happens circa 537 to 516 BCE. Now remember, on the other side of zero, the timeline goes backwards. So when I say 537 to 516, understand that it's actually going backwards, because it's got to get to zero before it goes ahead. think about it like a thermometer, so to speak. So I know that's how time's fucked. Think about it. Think about how our chronology's fucked. We'll talk about that. So around circa 537 BCE to 516, approximately 20 years or less or more, it looks like, they were able to rebuild the second temple under the Persians. We're going to skip ahead again. We're going to skip ahead to a significant date, and we're going to talk about 332 BCE. Now, this is when Alexander the Great defeats the Persians, and on his way to Egypt, on his way to Egypt, conquers Jerusalem, and the historical account says they conquered Jerusalem pretty easily, actually. And apparently the successors of Alexander the Great had desecrated the temple. Now, once the supporters of Alexander and his successors came in and started desecrating the temple, that led to the Maccabean revolt against the Greeks and Hellenism. Now, at this point, Greece was starting to get absorbed by Rome. So at some point, very shortly after the Maccabean revolt, Rome actually takes over Greece and seizes control of the area. They destroy Corinth, and basically Rome is the new power. Now, this is 150 years before the supposed birth of Jesus. I just want to leave it right here for a second. After the Roman Empire seizes control of Greece, history goes dead until the birth of Jesus, and even still, it wasn't until the temple is destroyed and Jews are banned from Jerusalem in 70 AD does anything ever happen significant again. So there were, from approximately circa, now we're in the Common Era. At the birth of Jesus, we have gone from BCE to CE. Understand that we're now past zero at the birth of Jesus, but we're going to go way past the birth of Jesus because not much is recorded in history. There was no exchange of power during this time in what we would call world history. Rome was in control, and Rome stayed in control. And at some point, once again, they destroyed the second temple. Okay? Now, before this second temple was destroyed, the Jews had already started to revolt against Rome because once again, they were starting to desecrate the temple, and they had started to put idols in the temple. They were basically false idol worshiping all up in and around the temple, and the Jews would continue to rebel against Rome. Now, this happened a few years before Jerusalem was actually sacked. Now, as these wars at Rome against Rome would continue, these wars would continue for about 6 or 7 years. Now you're starting to think, okay, who were these Jews? Because these Jews, who were continuously rebelling against Rome for a series of about 3 wars over the span of 6 years, these Jews got heart. Now, do these Jews sound Khazarian? As a matter of fact, the Khazarians haven't become Jews yet, have they? These Jews got heart. These Jews sound like warriors. So during this time, the Jews continued to war against Rome until the Bar Kokhba revolt, and they were basically wanting to liberate Jerusalem. So at this point, the Jews were finally defeated, and they were banned from Jerusalem, and they could not practice their religion. They could not celebrate their religion. They couldn't celebrate their culture. They were banned. Now, this is a very significant time in history, okay? The location of Jerusalem is very, very much so tied to the location of that temple. Well, the second temple was destroyed in 70 AD, okay? Now, this is supposedly after the life of Jesus that really can't be documented of any real contingency in history. I mean, we don't have any real record of that. So at this time, 70 AD, the Romans despise the Jews to the point that they wipe the name of Israel off every map in the world and vowed that Jews would never make it back to Jerusalem. They would continue and make vow to hide their heritage forever. This is in 70 AD. 200 years later, Constantine becomes a Christian. And of course, makes Christianity a state religion. But wait, wasn't Jesus a Jew? Don't Romans despise Jews? Moving along, we're going to go all the way till the birth of Muhammad. So for anyone who saw the Moore documentary, the Moore lecture that I did, I cover history from about 7/11 on, and I cover from the initial birth of Muhammad, just in case you need to understand the context of history. I don't have to do too much explaining at this point because you guys should be able to get it. I don't need to really explain the history of Jerusalem really past a certain point before you start to understand the deception. And the major deception starts to happen around the time of Islam. Because what do we know? What also validates the location of Jerusalem? So we'll talk about that moving forward. Now, in between all of this, you still have to remember that Jesus was at year 0, and Constantine made Christianity a state religion of Rome in 325. Now, between all this, there's a nigga named Jesus, and all the Gentiles fell for him, and he was a hated Jew? How? How? Somebody must be sleeping on the zone.
Get your ass up. Ain't no sleeping on the zone. Get your ass up. Get your ass up. Ain't no sleeping on the zone. Ain't no sleeping on the zone. Get your ass up. Ain't no sleeping on the zone. Ain't no sleeping on the zone. Ain't no sleeping on the zone. Ain't nobody safe.
Where the fuck are these niggas at? A third world trap museum? The fuck? First of all, let's look at the obvious red flags in the timeline. I think this is the most glaring evidence. During the time of Jesus, no major events were recorded to specify its time, date, or location. Yet the entire calendar is arbitrarily based off this date. There is a huge gap of non-activity during these centuries as it concerns the official history of Jerusalem and Jesus. Jews were getting persecuted during a supposed peaceful era of Roman rule? Well, actually, I can't believe that because we know Jews represent us copper-colored Israelites, and we already know who Rome is. Or do we? Well, that's for another time. After the life and death of Jesus, the very next significant event is the Roman siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE, where they destroyed the Second Temple. This led to a series of wars, which were already taking place between Jews and Romans, that lasted over 6 years. The Jews tied up the Romans for nearly a decade. By the end of the Bar Kokhba revolt, Rome had banned all Jews from the city and forbade them to practice in Judea. Rome had a newfound hatred for these Jews, so much that they had Israel wiped completely off every map. So here is one layer of the deception. Within this first layer, there are several other layers. The location of Jerusalem is exclusively tied to the location of the temple and the city of David. The first temple was destroyed in 589 by the Babylonians. Cyrus the Great allows graciously the Jews to come back in Jerusalem and rebuild the second temple with Herod the Great. Alexander comes back in 330, circa 330 BCE, conquers Jerusalem. Following Alexander, the Greeks desecrate the temple generations later. So by the time AD 70 comes around and the second temple is now destroyed, and now the Romans hate Jews more than ever, to the point that they made a vow to disconnect all Jews from their homeland forever. Couple that with the fact that 2 years later, all of a sudden, Rome is ready to follow a Jew and create an entire religion behind him. In addition, his life, which is literally legend at this point, happened to take place in the very same era that Rome vowed to hide from all Jews forever. What would ever make anyone think that this location was authentic? Ooh, I get it now. Jesus wasn't only created to manipulate chronology, he was also created to manipulate history and geography. But what about Muhammad? Didn't he ascend to heaven in the very same place? If the Romans were supposed to be hiding Jerusalem, why do they support a Jew from the burbs of J-Town? That would seemingly contradict everything they hate about Jews. But if they could only get the real Jews to buy the bullshit.
It's over, 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 when it's over, 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 when it's over, it's over.